With Keller Williams Realty, coming at you from the house, just like so many of you are at home during this time. We're on day 45 of our lockdown at our home here in Austin, Texas, and just taking a look at the market, seeing what's happening, and wanted to share some insights with you all. So we put together this information that you're seeing here on the screen to help you, to help our clients, to help our colleagues in kind of come up with some strategies and paint a picture of some certainty that it's really interesting, because as our team serves markets across the country, we have a unique perspective into areas that are being affected differently by the pandemic and the associated lockdowns. So what we'll do today is we'll talk a little bit about some of the strategies that our team is using to continue to sell houses in this time. You know, in the month of March, when kind of the world went on lockdown, we still had 12 buyers and sellers that wanted to close an escrow with us, and 10 more that wanted to open one. And so far in the month of April, we're seeing about the same thing, that about 2 to 3 times a week we have a buyer or seller that wants to get the ball rolling on the process. And more importantly, what we're seeing is a lot of people spending a lot of time in their houses searching for real estate. So I just have this suspicion that a lot of you out there, including myself, are looking at your current quarantine situation, maybe wishing for something a little different. And this too shall pass. And when it does, I believe that there will be a wave of home buyers looking to upgrade their property or move to different areas. Not to mention the fact that we all suddenly figured out we can work remotely. And so we don't need to live as close to the city or as close to work, because with the ability to Zoom or GoToMeeting or Microsoft Teams, it's really changing the way that we think about work. And it's so cool to be a part of this time in history. So I'll share some stats with you here. In Tucson, Arizona, for the month of March 2020 versus 2019, what you can see is there were about 2,400 people that decided March 2020 was a just fine time to put their house on the market. In fact, it was up about 4% year over year. And that kind of goes contradictory to what the media is saying, that homes aren't selling and people aren't listing. Well, the reality is there's more homes that came on the market this March than last March. Looking at pending listings, now what pending means is that there was a buyer and a seller. They had a meeting of the minds and they agreed to put the property in escrow. So there were 1,872 buyers and sellers that agreed this March versus 1,950 last March. So it's a change of really only about 4% year over year. So clearly there's a little bit of impact there, but 4% certainly isn't what the headlines in the news would lead you to believe. But then there's this last and really most important piece called closed sales. And what closed sales represents is somebody who is already in a contract deciding to execute and finish that contract. And I think it would be easy to believe that there are people out there that they were in contract to buy a house, and the seller or the buyer got cold feet because of everything happening in the world, and they just decided not to close. And there certainly were some of those. But when you look at as a whole, we still had almost 1,879 closings in the month of March this year, which is up 2.25% over the same year last month. So Tucson as a whole has a fairly low number of cases. The lockdowns came pretty late in the month, and generally the real estate market didn't feel the impacts of it like some of the other markets. So let's shift and let's look at San Diego. So look at San Diego. 2020 versus 2019, we had 15,000 new listings. So obviously much bigger metropolitan area in San Diego versus 19,000 the year before. So down 21%. So clearly where San Diego went on lockdown much earlier than Tucson. And also there's just a much higher prevalence or case rate in San Diego. Fewer people decided to put their home on the market. But when we look at the number of closed sales, which again, that's buyer and seller that they were in escrow probably before March started, that went through with it, that closed the escrow, it's about the same, down 3% from the previous year. 11,848 buyers and sellers shook hands and traded keys and money in the month of March. So I think this is really great evidence to show that the world has in many ways come to a screeching halt, and yet the real estate market across the country is alive and well. Now, in Austin, where we live today, the market's doing about the same thing as San Diego. About 16% fewer homes coming on the market. Days on market is actually down, which tells you that probably these listings coming to market are more your serious sellers, not the I want to test the price of the market, see what I can get type folks. And so those homes are going to sell a little quicker because they're priced and presented more competitively. So looking at the number of new listings on market, it was down about 2%. Pendings down about 7.8%, and then closings down about 0.1%. So mostly flat here. I think Austin, from an inventory perspective, has definitely shrunk over the course of the year, which just continues to reinforce that narrative of this being a very active, one of the best sellers markets in the country, in fact. But when you look at new listings coming to market, et cetera, and like actual maybe virus and lockdown impacts, to me, if you've got 16% less inventory and 7% less homes going under contract, there's kind of more of a correlation there than to virus impacts. So I think when you look at Austin and Tucson, these have not exactly been hot spots. They were pretty late in the month to lock down. And then you see San Diego that locked down a little earlier in the month. So really interesting stuff that we're seeing in the month of March. We're getting close to the end of April. We'll put this together again in April. But for those of you that are out there thinking about doing something, thinking about selling, thinking about buying, read through this. There's some great strategies. And I think most people don't realize that you can actually buy or sell a home, the same way that you're working. You can do it mostly remotely. And there are contingencies and clauses that we can write into contracts to protect your interests, because there is always the fact that you got to walk through a house to make sure that you love it before you buy it and move into it. But there's a lot of that diligence on the front end you can do remotely. So I hope this helps. Stay safe out there. Signing off, it's Jerimiah Taylor here at Keller Williams Realty.